as you can see right here, there's a lot of nice rocks out here that you can crawl over, especially at this Hungry Valley riding area that we're at here. You can find some rocks, you can crawl over them, and out here this is open to ride anywhere in this rocking area, so you can kind of just see what you can do, test man and machine. Rock crawling for ATVs is just a little different than you see the big, high suspended trucks with the long travel. You know, these have a pretty good suspension travel, and you can play around on the rocks. It kind of depends on throttle control, but just knowing that you see some rocks in the terrain, thinking, oh, look at that, it's way off camber. I don't know if I can get traction there, and then when you start to play in it, you crawl through it slowly, and once you make it out, you totally have a smile on your face. Oh, I got to do that again.
I always like to ride in stuff that's a little bit more technical, and when you can find rock formations and little canyons to ride through, it definitely heightens that sense of exploration, because the vast open spaces are neat. I like the long views, but when you're climbing through the rocks or winding through between huge boulders, it's pretty neat because every turn is a little adventure. You don't know what's going to be there, and I like that.
Even though navigating giant boulders takes every bit of concentration you may have, somewhere in the back of your mind you can't help but think of something very familiar, somewhat nostalgic.
Today these rocks are kind of reminding me of, you know, some of the old John Wayne flicks, or even when I was growing up, one of my heroes was like Roy Rogers, you know, Bullet and Trigger. You know, I was looking for them today. I couldn't find them.
Riding on these desert trails is a lot like going back in time. I felt like I was in a spaghetti western the whole time. And wouldn't you know, I came around the corner and what did I see? A cattle drive. I kept saying earlier, I keep waiting for John Wayne or somebody to hop out from behind a rock, and here you guys are.
Right here, in the flesh.
Seriously, John Wayne, Billy the Kid, where are you guys? This is nuts. You come out here and we just saw a cattle drive of all things that came through the desert. I mean, what's the chances of seeing 300 cattle come through with a bunch of horses driving through? It's just nuts.
What are you guys doing out here?
We are the wagons from the Reno Rodeo cattle drive, and we come through here every year. And following us is a herd of 300 head of cattle that are on their way to Reno to open the Reno Rodeo.
You know, this is the last thing I would expect to see out in the middle of the desert.
You're absolutely right. It is the last thing you'd expect.
You come around the corner and what do I see? Reno Rodeo. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are.
We are the Reno Rodeo Cattle Drive, and we have about 8 wagons. All these wagons are carrying the guest gear. There's 50 guests that pay to come on this. It's quite similar to the City Slickers ride, and they come on this. Some of them have never been on horseback. They come on here to have a good time for 4 days out in the desert, and we go into Reno on Thursday, go down through Reno with 300 head of steers, and go into the Livestock Event Center and open up the Reno Rodeo.
Where are you from?
St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
And you came all the way here for this?
All the way here because I love rodeo and I love horses and cattle, and this was a fantasy I always had, so having ridden, it was time for me at 66 years old to come on out and play.
Some of the stuff has never changed, but you're doing it in a modern way. You're on the modern horse, experience the Old West. It's great.
Often when you get out in places like Nevada, you have all kinds of issues with Indian tribes and reservations and whatnot, right?
Yeah, when you're riding in the western U.S., you do come upon a lot of land that is tribal land. There are vast open stretches that are maintained by the BLM, but there are a lot of tribal lands as well, and you need to respect that because, you know, there's people there and that land means a great deal to them. It's part of their culture and their heritage, and you definitely want to respect it as much as you'd respect anybody else's heritage, really.
I think that this whole area and being out here in this region of the country, you know, it's the Wild West kind of still, and it's desolate. There's not a city in sight really from where we're at, where you can see. And you see Pyramid Lake, and some of the Native American ladies today were telling us some of their story and some of their heritage of bones of their ancestors that date back like 9,000 years. That's amazing. You know that you're riding in a historical area, and for that fact alone, that they allow you to do that is a blessing, because you get to experience it.
It's just awesome to think the fact that centuries ago there was Indians out here and Native Americans now that they drove through these areas, and this was sacred ground, and they came down from this lake back here, and 20 miles they went through and drove for food and antelopes and hunted. It's just awesome. It's kind of a powering feeling to just know that you're on some sacred ground.
Over time, portions of these sacred lands have been opened to the public by the various Native American tribes. It's an opportunity to see the beauty and tour the ancestry of the Old West. When we come back, we'll take you to Pyramid Lake, a hallowed ground held sacred by the Paiute Indian tribe.
Don't you think it's about time to build memories of a lifetime with your family? The time is now to take part in a wild weekend family adventure. Visit wildweekendtv.com. Coming up next, more Wild Weekend Adventures.